I was a teenager, fresh out of high school. I was looking for a job. I was lucky I found one. I found a good job in a shoe factory. My job was to knock shanks into ladies' shoes, which I did 4 hours. Then I had lunch. Then came back. I had knocked in the ladies' shanks another 4 hours. And every time the boss came by, Mr. Bushwick, he'd say to me, work faster, go faster, go faster. So I was lucky, though, in those days to have a job at all. And at night I went to college. So my life was knocking the ladies' shanks into Mademoiselle's shoes, going to college at night and going to sleep and waking up. And then I went into the Army. And I felt so good. It was such a difference from having the life that I was engaged in and going into the Army. It was very exciting. They handed me a rifle that weighed 9 pounds. 9 pounds. And they also told me that I had the right to go into a foreign country, people I didn't know, and kill them and shoot them. And that excited me. I felt that I had transitioned from a skinny little boy, I was a lot shorter then, I looked like a Boy Scout, and suddenly I was a man with all this power. So I found it to be exciting. The thought of death never occurred to me. I was young, I was 18 years old. How could I possibly die? I didn't think of death at all. What I did think about were my parents. I knew that my parents, actually everybody's parents, if they knew that I was going into combat, that it would devastate them. So I had an older sister. We conspired to make up that I would be stationed in Alaska. My parents were immigrants. They didn't read or write English, so my sister covered for me. I sent her my mail, and I told my parents that I was in Alaska. I was perfectly safe because the Eskimos have never attacked anybody. So we managed to pull it off, because I figured that my parents wouldn't be more devastated if they had known all along that I was in combat. Say, if anything did happen to me and somebody knocked on they rang the bell and handed them a telegram, I figured that it wouldn't hurt them more if they had been worried all along. So, and it worked. So my parents were fine, and that was my state of mind. My state of mind was that I was going into a Western movie. I was raised on Westerns, and I wasn't aware that in a Western movie, after the villain is shot down, when the workday is over, he gets up and goes home. I mean, these thoughts, they didn't occur to me. Basically, I was a naive teenage kid. That was my state of mind. Now, since we weren't familiar with the use of handguns, we were given instructions on their use, and then we lined up for inspection. We had the officers walk down the line to see that we knew the proper care and use of the handgun. So our job was, as the officer walked in front of us, we would hold the handgun up like this. First, we would take the clip out, and we were told that there's a bullet remaining in the chamber even after you take the clip out. So we were told to take the clip out, hold the handgun like this, and pull the trigger, and then the officer would go on to the next man. Well, being a teenage kid, when the officer reached me, so I had the handgun like this, I pulled the trigger, and boom, there was a tremendous noise that came out of the gun. What happened was, I forgot to take the bullet out of the chamber. I carefully removed the clip, but I forgot, so I forgot now. That is, in the Army, is a major offense. The officer who was in front of me was, his name was Captain Connors. So he looked at me with surprise and dismay. But Connors never reported me, because if he had, I would still be doing KP even at my age. But he never said a word about it, just moved on to the next soldier. And, you know, I was getting an idea of what kind of a man Connors was, because, I mean, if we're talking about what kind of officers we had, the next thing that happened with Connors, you know, when we were doing some kind of service or exercise, we had to stack our rifles. We would put the tips of the rifles together in a triangle and stack other rifles against it. Now, again, if we made the stack of rifles fall, that too was a major offense, because the rifles got dirt into it. The rifles wouldn't function, and a rifle is our lifeline, because if you have a rifle in combat and it's not going to shoot a bullet, we're doomed. So, of course, when I stacked my rifle, being a teenage kid, the stack fell down into the dirt. Connors was there. He told me to go back to my squad, and he stacked the rifles himself, did an expert job, never reported it. And we had magnificent leadership. I mean, these were the kind of men that I don't think I ever met men of this caliber in my life. And I'm talking about from my buddies who were next to me in combat, and all the way up to General Eisenhower. The one exception, of course, is General Patton. Leave him out of people who were admired, because I'm not the only one who hated Patton. Everybody in the Third Army despised Patton, but that's another story. The people that I admire, I can tell you about General Eisenhower. We were once about to be engaged in a battle where the enemy, the Germans, held the high ground, and that's you know, a tough battle, because if you're going uphill and you're fighting uphill and they're shooting down at you, you can't run that fast when you're going uphill. It's the idea is always take the high ground. So this was a battle for the high ground, and we were lined up on the jump-off line. We're ready for the attack, and we see a Jeep roll up right up to the battlefield, and on the plate in front of the Jeep was a circle with 5 stars, and who gets out? Ike, General Eisenhower, with that big smile. and he walks up to us. He asks us, "What's your name?" And, tells us some words of encouragement. There was nobody between Eisenhower and the enemy. You talk about a general being on the front lines. Ike was on the front lines. Patton, we never saw. He never left Nancy. Nancy's not a girl. Nancy's a town way back in France. He never left that place. So Ike finally went back into his Jeep, and the battle started. But we all loved Ike, and he deserved us. Deserved it. In my outfit, in the 95th Division, 378th Infantry, we were led by Colonel Maroon, Audrey J. Maroon. Now, you talk about magnificent men. Maroon was an unbelievable man, tall, handsome, and he always led his troops from the front. Actually, Patton had issued an order that all the officers have to lead from the front. Maroon would have led from front anyway. The incredible order that Patton had issued was that officers have to wear their insignia, their bars in combat. Now that meant death or destruction for almost every officer. Can you imagine if you're leading your platoon from the front with your insignia on, how easy it is to get picked off? And unfortunately it happened. Almost every officer in my outfit was either killed or wounded, including Colonel Maroon. So what happened at one time I can remember, just to give you an example of what Colonel Maroon was like. We were marching through a small town. There were a couple of farmhouses on the left, and we were marching in two columns. And where the town ended, there was a bunch of bushes, and the back of the bushes were trees. So suddenly, from behind the bushes, a machine gun opened up at us. And what we were taught to do was, of course, to scatter, to go to both sides of the road, lie flat, because if you're flat, you make a shorter target. So I scattered. I was perfectly happy. I was content to be safe there. And then, on my right, I hear Colonel Maroon say, I'll never forget those words, "By God," he said, "I'm going to knock out that machine gun myself." And I'm thinking, Colonel Maroon has a handgun, a .45. You can't knock out a machine gun with a handgun, even if you're John Wayne. So I see he draws his handgun, and he's waving it, and he's about to run onto the road. Now, I had a rifle, okay. With a rifle, you have a chance. So I loved Colonel Maroon like my own father. I didn't want the colonel to get killed, so I ran out onto the road. I hit the ground, and the firing started up again in the bushes, and you see little clumps of earth getting kicked around, but the clumps of earth didn't hit me. So, you fire, where we see that the bush is moving, and the firing stopped, got quiet. So when it got quiet, I got up, I walked up to the machine gun. So manning the machine gun, one of the German soldiers was dead. He looked to be, man in his 20s. The other kid, he looked to be like a boy who was 15 or 16 years old. he was part of what they called the Hitler Jugend, the Hitler Youth Movement. And just like in the American Army, the people who were assigned to man a machine gun, that was usually a suicide mission, because I mean, you can keep firing the machine gun, but eventually you'll get killed or wounded or captured. So now this kid was still alive, the second one, and when he saw me, he took out this hand grenade. It was, we called it a potato masher, because it was shaped like this, and what they do is they screw up the top, and they throw it, it explodes. So when the kid saw me, he figured he wasn't going to live anyway. So with as much strength as he had left, he was screwing off the top of the hand grenade. Now I was standing there, I was looking at him, and I found out later this was true of a lot of us, that if we were able to see his face and his eyes, it was very hard to shoot, to kill them when you're actually looking at them. Because, in combat, what you generally see is movement, and you're shooting at movement, and you don't really know the people that you're killing. But this kid I was looking at, and I was trying to think. My first thought was, how can I help this kid? And he's turning the hand grenade. So Captain Smith, who was the CEO of the company, he rushed up and said, "Jesus Christ!" And he had a carbine. Carbine has 9 shots. So he shot the kid right through the middle with all 9 bullets. It almost cut the kid in half. So it's important to remember this. Captain Smith killed the kid. I didn't kill him. So, because years later, for some unknown reason, I started to have dreams that the kid rose up and he said in German, because I speak German, he said, we could have been friends, he said, but instead you killed me and you got a medal for it. And I said to him in my dream, I didn't kill you. but it didn't do any good. Ironically, sometime after the war, my wife and I, we were in a summer resort on vacation, and at the dinner table, a couple sat down who were very friendly to us. His name was Kurt, and his wife's name was Doreen, and we got to be extremely friendly. And Kurt told me that he had been a soldier in the German army. And what happened with Kurt was that eventually he was captured and he was sent to England, and he said it was a wonderful experience going from being a German soldier into being a prisoner of war in England. And that's where he met Doreen, who was a beautiful British girl, and they were married. They came to America. He opened up a business, became extremely successful, and he was very happy the way things turned out. Now, we became extremely friendly. We spoke about the war, we joked about the war, and we agreed on almost everything. He had a terrific sense of humor. I would start laughing as soon as I saw him walking up. and he's a very close friend. And the, as I said, ironic thing about it was that if I had met Kurt on the battlefield, I would have had to kill him. There were times when we had to have a patrol or mission, or which we executed at night, usually, in order to have a squad go out to where the enemy line is, bring back a German prisoner, and interrogate him, because it's important to know the amount of men the enemy has facing us, to know where they're stationed, and to know which German division they were in. We had to have this kind of intelligence in order to put the odds into our favor, so we know how to attack and maneuver where their flanks are. That's extremely important, because if you can get them from the side, you have a tremendous advantage. So these are the things we needed from prison. So we brought back a German prisoner quite often. There was one time when Connors led us, and these missions were usually more dangerous than being in ordinary combat, and it's not often that 6 men go out, that all 6 men come back. Anyway, on this particular mission, one of our men was wounded, and Connors put him on his back, carried him back to safety. Connors, again, incredible man. And then in one of the battles, Connors was hit, and the medics put him on a stretcher. They were about to put him on the truck to take him back to a hospital. So I was standing there when I saw Connors, and he looked up at me, and he saw me, and he smiled, and he put his thumbs up like this. Now, here's a young man. He's extremely wounded, and what is he concerned about? He feels sad because he sees how hurt I am. Well, they placed Connors on the truck, and he died the next day. World War II was absolutely necessary. I mean, we had to fight this war, because if we hadn't won this war, there would be no America. So we had to not only fight this war, and we had to win this war. So the death of Connors, as horrendous as it was necessary. But there are times that I think how necessary were the deaths of other Connors who fought in the subsequent wars that America was engaged in. Was the death of another Connor worth what we gained from the wars after World War II? We took care of each other. There was one time when Colonel Maroon was hit during a severe artillery barrage from the enemy. and he was bleeding profusely. He was lying on the ground, and he gave me his phone because as a colonel he had to keep in touch with all the other outfits to make sure he knew where all of our people was. So he told me to call a medic. So I used the phone, no answer. Apparently the phone had been knocked out of commission too. So I looked down at the colonel and I said to him, "I'm sorry, son, but I can't reach anybody now." So, strange enough, with all that barrage going on, I felt extremely embarrassed because I made a Freudian slip. I meant to say, "I'm sorry, sir." Instead, I called him son because he looked so helpless, like a child there. So, can you imagine feeling embarrassed in the middle of combat because you had used the wrong word? But all people are still human, and I felt badly about calling him son. I'm sure Colonel Maroon didn't care at all what I called him. So I knew that the colonel couldn't last much longer because the blood was spurting out at times. So I ran through the artillery barrage, and luckily I found a medic, brought him back, and the medic stopped the bleeding. So Colonel Maroon was flown back to London, and they patched him up. He was gone maybe 6 or 7 weeks, and he came back to our regiment. When he came back, he called a meeting of the entire regiment because in those 6 or 7 weeks, we suffered the usual amount of casualties. We were still in Patton's army, so the casualties were terrific. There were a lot of new replacements, and the colonel wanted to meet them, and they should meet him. So he he spoke to the regiment about our past, what the 95th Division had accomplished, and I wasn't paying much attention. I was sitting in the back because I was aware of what we had accomplished because I was there, so my mind was drifting off. But in his speech, I heard my name mentioned, Private Hart, and then that piqued my interest. Then I started to listen, and he was talking to regiment, about the fact that I'd saved his life, that he was just inches of bleeding to death. Never spoke about the other incident where he was going to attack a machine gun with a handgun, because he probably would have felt foolish saying that. But he did talk about the fact that I got him a medic and saved him. And then he mentioned some other things that were extremely flattering. He said that I was the coolest man he'd ever seen on the fire. He said that he was promoting me to corporal. He said that he was proud to recommend me for a Bronze Star, and while he was saying that, I had I guess they would call it an out-of-body experience. I'd never felt anything like this before. I was sitting in the seat, but I felt that I had risen out of my seat, and I was looking down at myself. It was one of the nicest feelings that a human being could experience. And when the session was over, we were walking out. The new recruits were turning to us, they were saying, "Which one is Hart? Which one is Hart?" And I'm thinking, that's me. Then from the shoe factory, the colonel, who was a mythical god to me, is talking about me, and it was a wonderful feeling. There was one time when we were getting ready to attack a German fort. That the fort actually had been built by the Belgians, which the Germans took over very early, and the fort was built into a hill, and it extended. It was extended many. Actually, no. I was told that the fort was a third of a mile wide. It's hard to believe that what I was told was true. Does that sound logical to you, that a fort built into a hill was a third of a mile long? I mean, I hate to say that. It doesn't sound real. But so I'm not going to say it, but that's what I was given to understand. But how can I describe how big the fort was? Okay, the fort was built into a hill. It was considered impregnable. Artillery wouldn't do much damage. Tanks wouldn't do much damage. Even bombing from a plane wouldn't do much damage to the fort. But it boiled down to assaults by the infantrymen using flamethrowers or whatever kind of weapon could enter the openings, the apertures of the fort. Now, we were lined up, waiting for the order to shoot off. Now, there was level ground leading up to the fort, about 200 yards of level ground. And we were on a bit of a second hill that we were camped on. And the thought occurred to me that since I speak German, why don't I go down there and speak to them in German and tell them what the situation is. That we had our entire division lined up back of us, and we were prepared to keep attacking the fort until we take the fort, because the fort was right near the border of Germany, was the entrance to Germany, and if we bypassed the fort, I understand that they could fire at us from the fort and cause tremendous damage. The fort to us was indispensable. I understood later, I learned that the fort was indispensable to Hitler too. I learned that Hitler had given orders to hold the fort at all costs. So this would have been an awful battle. So it occurred to me, I speak German, I'm human, these people are human. well, why don't I go down there and speak to them? I mean, what do I have to lose? What do I have to gain? Now, to lose, I have my life to lose because I'm facing the fort. There's nobody between the fort and me. You know, a lot of the Americans are deployed in back of me, but I'm still in the front line. Being in the front line of assault, my chances of getting killed are extremely good. So I figured, go for it. Now, I didn't have a T-shirt. I wasn't wearing one. So, but the soldier next to me, I asked him for his T-shirt. He handed me the T-shirt. So I was vigorously waving the T-shirt and walking the 200 yards up to the fort. I was still thinking of the medic who got shot because I was thinking, would the Germans think, well, they have to shoot me and they have one less American soldier to contend with? But all right, I went to the fort, got to the entrance, and the commandant, the German commandant, came out with his adjutant, and the commandant was a beautiful hunk of man. He was like 6'6". He had boots, shiny boots up to his knees. He had a cap with all that gold embroidery, which I learned later in Germany represented part of the awards and the medals that this commandant had won in order to become a commandant. He looks down at me, this skinny kid, and I tell him that, look, I said, we have an entire division. I said, we're going to take the fort anyway. I said, if my entire division can't take it, we'll have a second division come, third division, and we're going to take the fort. And eventually, you and your men will be killed. I said, you can save all your men and yourself by surrendering the fort. So the commandant looks down at me and says, "Ich weiß ganz gut," he says, "I know full well that what you say is true." He said, "but I took, as a German officer," he said, "I took an oath to be willing to die for Hitler, so I can't surrender the fort." Turns around, goes back in the fort, adjutant follows him, go back in the fort. I go back to my position, and a few minutes, maybe 5 minutes after I'm back, I see the commandant comes out of the fort, and he's waving a white cloth. So what must have happened is that, you know, when the commandant and his adjutant went back, the adjutant must have told the men what happened. Now the men did not take an oath to be willing to die for Hitler. I'm sure that the men would have been willing to kill the commandant and surrender the fort. So I came back to the commandant, and Captain Smith joined me, and there was another officer joined me. We negotiated the means of the surrender, and the German soldiers started to march out of the fort. Well, never in my life did I see a happier group of people than those German soldiers marching out of that fort, because I can understand this. Here, there were all these young people who expected to die, who thought that they only had a few days left to live, and had were absolutely certain that they would never see their families again. And here suddenly their lives are given back to them, and they were ecstatic. And their step was almost like a dance step. You almost felt like it was a dance troupe marching down the road. We sent for trucks to come up, and the Germans, now that they were prisoners of war, they were put on the trucks and escorted back to the rear. This was, just another example of helping the enemy soldiers. Of course, it helped us too. The amount of casualties that we would have suffered on the American side might have totaled into hundreds and hundreds of American soldiers, and the amounts of casualties on the German side, I was told later that they had 800 German soldiers in there, so that would have been 800 dead young people, plus the commandant and his adjutant. That's another 2 people. And so there are some instances of war which does have a happy ending, and I felt extremely good, not only for the American lives that were saved, but also for the German lives. I personally didn't feel any hatred towards the German soldiers. My goal for being there was to fight Hitler. General Patton may have been a great general, gained a lot of territory, but at great cost to the GIs who served under him in terms of dead and wounded. Patton lived up to his nickname, Old Blood and Guts, but it wasn't his blood and it wasn't his guts, because we never saw Patton at the front. Patton wasn't concerned with making sure that we had food. There were even times that we were short of ammunition, and our hatred of Patton kept rising. The Army issued a statement when Patton died that he was killed in a Jeep accident. Now, none of us in the Third Army believed that for a second. We believed that he was killed by one of us who had taken the pledge to do something to Patton if we ever got the chance. And I'm sure that the Army didn't want the public to realize that General Patton, who was getting tremendous publicity from the newspapers, and to the American public, he epitomized the gallant American hero with his pearl-handled pistols and his swagger, that I'm sure that the Army High Command did not want his image tarnished, and I'm sure that they made up this story that he had died in a Jeep accident, but never for a moment did I buy that story. And recently, several books have come out that do tell the whole story. There's a book called The Death of General Patton, and in that book, he details who the American soldier was who killed Patton and the way it was done in very clear detail. And there's a book by Bill O'Reilly coming out in a few weeks that's called Killing Patton, and he too gives his version of the death of Patton. There were even rumors that the death of that Patton was killed by an international conspiracy, that the Russians killed him, or there were groups in America who didn't want him to come back and run for president, because everybody felt that if when Patton came back, he would run for president and be a shoo-in because he was a natural hero. He epitomized the war to the American public much more than General Eisenhower did. Eisenhower became president, but I believe that if it were between Eisenhower and Patton as to who would become president, I believe the public would have gone for Patton because they had no idea. I mean, there was a well-publicized incident where Patton walked into a hospital where there were wounded American soldiers, and one soldier there had cracked up, what we called combat fatigue in those days, or shell shock, and he couldn't function, and he was hospitalized. Patton walked up to him, called him a coward, slapped him in the face, and while there were reporters around who recorded the incident, because Patton was proud of this kind of behavior, that Patton liked doing it so much that when he found out there was another soldier in the hospital with combat fatigue, he did the same thing. Slapped him in the face, called him a sniveling coward, and tried to arrange for him to be discharged from the army, from the hospital, and be sent back to the front lines. Now, I don't know if Patton were able to accomplish that. It's my feeling that both of those soldiers were sent back to the combat with all the power that Patton had. So this was indicative of the kind of personality that Patton had.